Is the church still relevant anymore? In the wake of docuseries Church Online and church deconstructional testimonies spreading like wildfire, maybe you've been asking yourself, is church relevant or even needed in my life anymore? That's what we're going to be going and doing a deep dive into today, and in this video answering that very question. Also, for anyone that makes it to the end of the video, I have 3 free resources that I want to give away to somebody that will benefit you no matter if you're a pastor, deep thinker, new believer, or something else entirely. It's all related to this subject, and I promise you won't want to miss out on these if this video interests you, which, I mean, you clicked on it, right? So I can only assume that you are. So with that, let's jump into today's video. One of the things we see in our time is this suspicion of any organized institution. I mean, this is what every superhero movie or book teaches us. Or ask someone what they think of people on the opposite end of the political spectrum, and you'll see that anyone with money, power, or authority will at some point abuse these things and therefore should be rejected and discarded. One of the ways we see this prevalent today is with the church. From videos on TikTok of people talking about deconstructing from their faith and finding freedom from religion, or even a common phrase we hear a lot in Christian circles that it's all about a relationship and not a religion. I think these all play a part in the idea that church might not be as valuable or needed in one's life as we used to think, when I can just go about and do my own thing at my own time. There was even this little thing called the pandemic that really messed with church attendance. In a recent study by Barna Group, 1 in 3 practicing Christians dropped out of church completely during COVID-19. And back in June of last year, there were many stories about how houses of worship throughout the US had to shut their doors forever due to the pandemic. What's worse is church membership in the US dropped below 50% for the first time back in 2020, meaning most churches are at half of their usual attendance. So what happened? Is it just people falling out of rhythm and habit of attending church? Is it that a majority of churches upgraded their tech to reach their members during lockdown, and now online services are pulling people away from being there in person? Whatever those factors may be, what is clear though is many people in the last few years have been asking the question, is the church relevant? Do I need to still attend church gatherings somewhere, or can my relationship with Jesus just be enough? Even for those that have come back, they come but are not members of the church, meaning they come for the service and then leave immediately after and have no real ownership any more than you have a relationship with the movie theater in your area. In fact, there are a lot of similarities between these two groups that we can draw. Both attend in order to be entertained or moved emotionally or maybe motivated. You see, we become spectators when we become like this. So really, what is there any difference between a movie theater and a church? Well, to start, let's start with what the church is and isn't from a biblical perspective, before we dive into any methods in which churches try to be these things and see if any of them are relevant or beneficial to your life as a believer. First thing we have to acknowledge is that the church belongs to a triune God. The Father calls the church into being by the Son and indwells it by the Spirit, who then unites it all back to Christ. This is important because the church is the people of God, not a building or a house or a chat room. It's also the temple of the Holy Spirit and the body and bride of Christ. Outside of the Trinity, then, there is no church, because the identity, purpose, and activity can only be understood properly in relation to it. Here's what I mean by that. Let's take the identity first. The identity of the church is communal and relational. It gets this from God, who is 3 divine persons in constant, perfect communion, and who created the church for communion. The God who created everything is love, and this amazing love is found inside of the selfless relationship between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And out of that love, God creates everything that we see, including the church, and allows the church to be a free and creative expression of that inner Trinitarian love, meaning that while individual believers are a temple of the Holy Spirit, the Christian community is the ultimate temple of the Holy Spirit. The church is invited into a relationship and receives all the love and benefit into that Trinitarian love in the same way that you would think of a marriage when 2 come together. Hence, this is why it's called the bride of Christ, meaning that the purpose of the church becomes clear. Because we know the identity, the church exists to love God back, to love its own, the world, and the whole creation, because it is in this covenantal, loving relationship with God. To collectively come together then and be a light on the hill that displays and shows this love. So I know I just threw a lot of things at you all at once. Hopefully you can go back and study these passages, and maybe at this point you're wondering, how is this relevant to answering the question on is the church relevant or not? Here's what I want you to see and understand as the bottom line, that there is no backup plan to the church. The church biblically is not meant to be seen as something that is optional for believers. That we can't say, I have my relationship with Jesus and that's enough. I love Jesus, but I hate the church or what they're doing. I don't need the church or a gathering. I could read and study on my own. My theology and understanding of the church is better than theirs. And it's that isolation and that pride that spits in the face of Jesus and all that he commands and sets up for us to do and be. And if you're thinking, yeah, but you don't know my church experience, or what about this pastor and that scandal, or even the video you just did, Jay, on Hillsong being exposed, that there's just so much messiness when it comes to the church. Makes you wonder if it's even worth it. Here's my encouragement to you. The same God who made all things, who knows how all things begin and end, said this to Peter some 2,000 years ago. He said, Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Nothing will overcome the plan and vision Jesus has for his bride. Not some movement, not the good or bad ideas of the modern or American church. Nothing will overcome it. Do you not think that Jesus knows? He knows the state of the church right now. I might not know your reason or what factors made you consider asking the question, is the church relevant? But he does. He knows the challenges. He knows the messiness. This is why the Bible makes it clear that we are called to the mess, actually. Over 100 times in the New Testament, we see a command that has the phrase to one another, meaning and relating all of it back to how we should and shouldn't act towards one another in the Christian community. It says things like this: to love one another, stir one another up, bear one another. The list goes on. This is why, regardless of messiness, we need the church, because this is where God is at work and in the midst of sanctifying us through our relationships with one another. He calls us to one another in a local sense so that I am able to be fully known, that you are able to be fully known. And as we do this, it's also a call towards committing to one another, that our weaknesses and our strengths, our good side, our bad sides, are able to be on display and seen by all. So I want to encourage you, when you think about church, that gathering of faithful believers that God has called you to, whatever form that may be right now, that you would see it not just as something you are going to, but belonging to. That you get to be a part of it. Give your gifts and service for its betterment. Receive from it back, not just the parts that you like or prefer, but receive from it the things that may be difficult or challenging to you. The local church has always been messy. If you don't believe me, go and read 1st and 2nd Corinthians as proof. But hear me on this. The church will always be messy, regardless of where you go or how big it is or how small it is, if it's in person or online, or whatever they call themselves. Because there are a lot of sinners, us humans, involved in the church. We're needed and a part of what it means to be the church. But the messiness should not keep us from the main way the Spirit of God speaks and works in our lives to sanctify us. So if you're someone wrestling with this or simply see yourself as a spectator of the church right now, I want to encourage you today to take those necessary steps to be a participant in God's story of redemption in the local body. Bring your gifts, bring your expectations, receive all that God has for you there. And sometimes that will be things that are encouraging, like communion or baptisms that you hear, but it might also be in the rebuking or challenging disciplines. This is how we grow as iron sharpens iron. So be known, be open. Because in the end, it won't be an online service taking place or a church scandal that will make the church irrelevant in your life. But what would is your own apathy to see yourself as a part of it. Hey, thank you so much for checking out that video. If you liked it and made it this far, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps me out a lot. Also, for the giveaway, I have 3 different books for new believers or deep thinkers or anyone looking who wants to study the church and how to be a part of it. They're going to be linked down in the description below, so you can check them out there. And if you want a free copy of one of them, just comment in the question of the day which of these 3 you would want, and I'll pick a winner and announce it in my next video. But with that, okay guys, have a great day. Know that you are valued and loved, and I'll see you soon. Bye.